All right, good afternoon, everyone. We are here for part two of our blended learning in the NEPF discussion. And I am Brian Lenz. I am a coordinator in the online and blended learning department.
And I'm Tambry Tondrick, Executive Director of Operations for Beacon Academy of Nevada, which is a blended state public charter school. Thanks for joining us. What we're going to focus on tonight are one of the five domains of blended learning, and we're going to discuss part two, instructional rigor. And what we will be doing is taking a look at instructional rigor and how that would look in a blended learning school, and then how you align that to the NEPF.
All right, so when we break down the domain into several different strands, the first strand in instructional rigor, when we start like a foundational skill of blended learning, is we want to provide varied learning experiences for our students. And so to do so, we have this scale that you may remember from our previous part one of beginning, developing, practicing, and achieving. And where this aligns to the NEPF is under our instructional standards. So at the bottom of the slide, you'll see 2.1, 2.2, 3, and 3.3, and 5.4. And just as a quick reference, in the chat, there will be a link to the NEPF so you can follow along with those standards and indicators as we go through each of these domains.
So in the beginning and the developing levels of the varied learning experiences, what you may have observed last year as teachers transition to blended learning is basically just, they're learning how to do the varied learning experiences, and it is different than classroom teaching. And so what you probably noticed in your classrooms is that teachers relied on direct instruction, DOK level 1 and, DOK level 1 questions and tasks. Most students were participating in a lesson and completing the assignments, possibly the same ones that were used in a brick and mortar classroom, but then they submitted them online. And some of the students may have missed the difficulty in this model is that the students may have missed the real world connections as teachers struggled with creating lessons in this manner. And so chances are you notice that there was very little differentiation. There was little engagement between the students and the teachers, very much busy work, and it was difficult for teachers to provide that connection with prior learning, and very little stop and check for understanding activities. And the primary reason for that is that it is a different style of teaching as you're learning to teach in a blended school. And so there is there's the learning curve for the teacher. There's the learning curve for the students as they get used to using the technology. And then on top of that, many teachers last year were developing curriculum for the students as they were trying to teach. And so building curriculum and content in an online environment is very time consuming. So this is very much probably what, as an administrator, you were observing in classrooms last year. Brian, do you have anything to add?
Oh, no, I think that was good. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I advanced to the next slide to go on to what it looks like at the practicing and achieving. And so really what we're looking for here is that there's multiple types of learning experiences that are happening in even the same class period. And so we really want to make sure that those experiences are authentic, connected to the real world for the students. And I like to think of Bloom's taxonomy, right? If we visualize that it's a pyramid where we have the foundational DOK level 1 type activities. What I don't like about that image is we kind of want to reverse it with time spent in the classroom. So we want to spend it when the teacher has the students in front of them. right? We want to be spending the most of those learning experiences towards the application, analysis, and synthesis type activities, and allow the students to be working on their own on the DOK level 1, so that those would become less. So it's almost like an inverted pyramid when we talk about time spent in the classroom. And really capitalize on the teacher being able to facilitate that kind of learning. And on those more challenging tasks, the students now have their peers they can engage with, they can ask the teacher for support, and then they're doing the lower level stuff on their own independently. So that's kind of what we're looking for. So those group collaborations, problem solving, reflection activities, we really want to transfer the knowledge and skill of the learning during this time. So when those things are happening, that's kind of the things that you're looking for in an observation. And so, oh, sorry, Tammy, did we need to stop down here? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you know, as an administrator, when you walk into the classroom, I was actually going on to the next slide, Brian. I saw you had advanced, so.
Okay. We'll get there. We'll get in sync.
We're doing a little comedy routine to keep this interesting tonight. It is just the two of us. So in any case, the observation guiding questions as an administrator when you walk in the room, some of the things you should be asking yourself to as you're observing the classroom is, what are the students engaged in? What are they being asked to do? Is it rigorous? Does it have any real world applications? Are the students all working on the same things, or are they working on different tasks? And then you should, as you would expect your students to improve and grow over the course of the year, you should also expect your teachers to grow over the course of the year. So what trends do you notice over the years you're observing the teacher? And if you're the teacher watching this presentation, those are the same things you should be asking yourself. You know, what are the students engaged in? Is it rigorous? Real world application? What instructional and assessment practices allow students to transfer their knowledge and skill? And so how can you design your online assessments? How can you design your online curriculum so that you are meeting those guidelines? I think, unless you have anything to add, Brian, if you want to go to the next domain.
That sounds good. So yeah, in this strand, when we start looking at differentiated learning objectives. So we're gonna, again, down at the bottom, you'll notice the NEPF alignment is down there. And in the chat is the quick link to the NEPF from RPDP. And so we're going to take a little bit closer of a look at each of these levels in the next upcoming slides. And so when we start talking about the beginning and the developing, what does it look like when we are differentiating learning objectives? You may only see one learning objective for that beginning teacher, right? There's no differentiation. And one of the things that you may see too is that maybe it only addresses a scaffolding, right? Going down and helping students that are not there, right? But we also want to see things that are there to help supplement and accelerate students that are ready for that as well. And so you want to see it on both ends. And if you're only seeing the one, then at the beginning and developing level is what you would expect that teacher to see, right? And it's just written on the board, old school style. This is what we're doing today. And so the other thing that you want to be able to see is, are students able to start to articulate or speak to what that learning objective is, right? And the students may be able to struggle and not understand what the actual purpose of the lesson is. Anything you want to add on that, Tammy?
No, I think that covered it. Thank you. So obviously, when you start moving into the practicing and achieving levels, the teacher is going to have different learning objectives posted to meet different students' needs and goals. And so they may not be posted for the class to see, but they may be in their lesson plans, or they may be in their online assignments. And if alternatively, if the whole class may be addressing the same learning objectives, but groups of students may be engaging in different activities, and those activities are more rigorous in some groups or more challenging for some groups of students. So you're going to vary the level of the assignment if they are working on the same thing. And so basically, is the lesson rigorous, relevant, and varied for those different learners that are within the class? And when you think about the implementation of this, so how can a teacher do this in a classroom? Elementary schools, I think, are very proficient. I know that they teach third grade, let's say. And within that third grade class, they have a variety of learning levels. At the high school level, scheduling is done to help break out some of those levels. But even within your honors class, you are going to have different levels of students. So what you often can use are two different blended learning models, the station rotation and the flex model. And the station rotation is exactly what you would expect to see in a highly engaged classroom. You have students seated in different stations. One of the stations in a blended model should be with an online curriculum or online materials so that they're learning using a program through the computer. And so the teacher may not be at that station. The teacher may be providing direct instruction to different groups, or the teacher may be working with reading or math practice, where they're helping the students in the application section. So the students are going around using different stations, and maybe they have 15 minutes at each station, bell rings, and you move the students to the next station, or whoever the teacher manages that. The other one would be the flex model, where the lesson content is online. Students move through the lessons at their own pace. And then during the class time, the teacher may be pulling out small groups or individuals who are struggling with the same part of the lesson, or maybe they are pulling students who need to be higher challenged and making them do some not making them, but having them do some more challenging assignments, motivationally coaching students who may need it, who they notice are experiencing maybe some challenges with social emotional aspects. So it allows teachers to help and provide those interventions to help overcome gaps in student learning. It provides opportunity for direct teaching, coaching students through difficult assignments. This allows the teacher to highly personalize lessons. Oftentimes, you may be accepting responses orally because you're having discussions. You may be doing some assessments in that or checking for understanding in those manners. And so, so those would be some of the practicing and achieving that you're going to see. Is the lesson rigorous, relevant? Are the students engaged? And that real world application. And if you are listening and like you're listening to a recording of this, I was, one of the things Brian and I wanted to ask of our participants were, who is there anybody attending who is working with fully online implementation? And so how are you doing that? And how is a fully online program different from a blended learning model? And then from the administrator standpoint, how is that different when you go to do your observations? And do you need any assistance with that? So we will always provide our contact information at the end of this and would be very happy to help anybody who needs a more personalized approach in what they're struggling with to overcome some of the challenges of implementation in their own school or classroom.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think the two things that I'd call out that I really like that you talked about is, the need here for digital content of some kind, right? For this to be realistically met at the practicing and achieving level, the teachers need that partnership with digital content. They can't there's not enough minutes in the day for them to develop a personalized learning plan for 30, 40 students. And so that having that digital content that's able to be adaptive to what the students need on a daily basis is essential. And then those oral responses, again, is so important. If now the teacher is able to free up some of that class time to have those conversations with students, you can ask different groups different questions based on what they need to be successful in the lesson, right? Whether it's hey, let me challenge this group of students because they're ready for more, or where can I start lower to help provide the scaffolding and get those kids up to where they need to be successful. And so when we look at then some of the questions that you would want to ask during an observation is, how is that lesson objective apparent, not just to the observer coming into the room, but also to the students? Are they able to say, why am I doing it? So just having the digital content isn't enough. Students should be able to understand why they're on that digital content and what the purpose is, right? It's not a babysitter. It's not like one of those old infomercials, the Ronco rotisserie, where you set it and forget it. It needs to be connected to the other learning activities. And so what are you going to start to notice over time as you come in? Are the students getting more familiar with the procedures and the purpose of the different activities that this teacher has planned? And so just kind of charting that out throughout the year, and that observation cycle is going to be essential.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the next domain since there aren't any questions from our audience. Domain 2.3, personalized learning pathways. And the beginning students follow the same pathway. Developing students follow maybe a customized pathway. Practicing follow customized pathways to accomplish academic and non-academic goals. And then achieving students follow customized pathways that adapt as necessary to accomplish their individual academic and non-academic goals. And then the NEPF alignment on this is standard 2, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, which has to do with learning tasks have high cognitive demand for diverse learners. And then standard 4 has to do with the students engage in metacognitive activity to increase understanding of and responsibility for their own learning. And so this is where we start looking at, do the students understand what they're learning, why they're learning it, how the teachers will monitor all of the students, and how they support all of their students as they take actions in their own self-monitoring. And so blended learning leads very well to support this NEPF alignment right here. So I'm going to cover the beginning and developing aspects of personalized learning pathways. And again, in the beginning and the developing, is the lesson rigorous, relevant, varied, and are the students engaged? Are the questions that you would ask yourself as a teacher or the administrator walking into the room? And if you see that most students complete the same series of activities, master the, an academic objective at the same time, they're doing it uniformly, and the same thing, they're primarily in the beginning and developing aspect of this domain. And that's okay. As Brian and I have said in the past, blended learning, online teaching is very different. And so it's going to take a teacher or an administrator or a school several years to be where they're very comfortable in this, till they have all of their units in this. And as we've said in the past, try small, try choosing a couple different units to start this with, and start there and see how you do. In the developing, we should see that a few students are starting to complete a series of activities or instructional experiences to master an academic learning objective. So maybe some of the students are doing something different. Maybe it's the students that are struggling with the concept, and maybe it's the students that are a bit more accelerated, that are on their own pathways. And then the pathways may be customized at the individual student level or group level. And so you're not always going to see it, but sometimes there's a customization. And so even in a highly engaged classroom where students are seated at different stations and doing different activities, sometimes if there's no differentiation at the stations, everyone is still doing the same thing at the same time and working towards the same learning objectives. You're still in this beginning and developing stages. Just because a student is assigned to work at a different table and a station for a specified period of time, if there's no differentiation, no accommodations for different learning levels, then you are still observing a beginning and developing, even in the station rotation. Same with the flex model. If the lesson content is online and the students are maybe going through the lessons at their own place, but the teachers are still teaching the same concept. Everybody's on the same lesson every single day. It's not differentiated. So you're still looking at this beginning and developing pathway. I'm going to turn it over to you, Brian, to take us to the next level.
Oh yeah, so when we start looking at, practicing achieving, and I like to just call a little bit of attention between what's the difference between differentiated learning versus what we're talking about here with personalized learning paths. Differentiating is like what they're learning, right? Is that different? This is more of the how, right? Is the how. So again, digital content is going to be important because that, as we talked about before, allows a teacher to provide more personalization. But we can also do it through simple activities, right? Like if you have like elementary students that are interviewing one another, they can practice their empathy and then still be connected to the content because they're learning different customs and beliefs and traditions from their classmates. So it's a truly personalized experience, and we've connected some non-academic goals to that academic pathway as well. And so starting to see those kind of things be more and more present in the learning activities, you would rate that teacher at the practicing and achieving level. And so we also want to see that these pathways aren't set in stone, right? It's not like I tested them at the beginning of the year and now this is their pathway, or I talked to the students and the parents and this was what was their goals, both academically and non-academic. Like I know one of the things we're working on with my kids is being more social, coming out of the pandemic, and they were stay-at-home kids. So social skills are a real important thing that we've talked with our teachers about, having more opportunities for them to work on those. The same thing we want to do here is how are we able to adapt those as it grows, right? Like now my daughter, she wasn't talking too much at all in the beginning. Now she might be talking a little bit too much. So maybe we need to dial that back a little bit, right? It needs to ebb and flow with the needs of those kids. All right. And sorry, Zoe, I don't mean to pick on you. You're doing great. Keep it up. And so when we start looking at what we truly mean by achieving at the personalized learning pathway, is it has to be relevant to the kid and it has to adapt. And this is the actual path that they're taking to get the differentiated instruction that we talked about before.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Those are great points. And just to emphasize the guiding questions for the teacher in the classroom or the administrator, are activities customized to reflect individual or group needs? Do you notice that the tasks have been purposefully scaffolded, modified, and extended to meet different students' needs? And so, there's, are the activities, are they doing different activities, same activities? It's even the same activity can be scaffolded. So, you do have to look for that. Are the activities customized to meet the diverse needs of the students in the classroom? So thank you.
All right, so then when we take a look at the fourth strand here in this domain, student-centered progression. So what we're looking at is, are the students able to move on upon their own mastery, or are they lock in step with every other student? And so at the very beginning stages, it's that traditional, hey, this is where we're at. We're going to test on Friday. So Monday, we're doing the introduction. Tuesday, we do an exploratory. Wednesday, we go over the homework. Thursday's review, quiz on Friday. Is everyone doing that same progression through the lesson? Or is there opportunities to advance based on how they demonstrate their mastery? Or are there opportunities for remediation and extension as needed as well? So you can see why these strands are lumped together because they are very, very similar. But this one takes it a little bit a step further by focusing in on the student. And so when we take a look at what is happening at the very baseline, beginning or developing with a student-centered progression, it's all whole group structure, right? All instruction is happening with the entire class. There's not any breakouts. There's nothing like that happening. So the differentiation is very, very low, and there's little to no opportunities to remediate or review based on data that says, hey, this student doesn't necessarily fully understand this concept before we introduce the next concept. When we look at the NEPF alignment, again, we're going to start to see that this aligns with standard 2 and strands 2, 3, and 4 there, and then also a little bit with standard 4, strand 2 and 3, and the last one, 5.4, which is the teacher being able to adapt the actions based on the evidence from the lesson for all students. And then I'll go on to the next for you, Tammy. If I can get to the slide.
That's okay.
Click the wrong screen.
Okay, I thought you were testing me to see if I had it memorized. So practicing and achieving. Instruction is based on the level of mastery of the individual or small groups of students. Therefore, pacing is flexible. Whole group structure for instruction is not relied upon. And so what you're looking at is that the instruction is based on the student. It's student-centered progression, exactly like it's titled. The student masters it, and then they move on. Some students may finish it in a day. Other students in your class are going to be on that concept maybe 5 days, maybe 6, 7. It just depends. It depends on the student. And so what you're looking at practicing and then achieving is that you see these systems in place to monitor individual student progress to allow for mastery. And so challenging pieces of this is having the curriculum in place to monitor the student progress, to identify when they are ready to move on and progress. And that's where you check for understanding. And as a teacher, you build those frequent checks for understanding, and you can do that in a variety of ways. And you should see when you're observing a class like this, the students are taking ownership of their own progress, and flexible grade level groupings are in place. So I've mentioned before that the school that Beacon Academy is a blended school, and we do not grade level schedule in our classes. If students are in English, they may be in an English class with students in English 1, 2, 3, or 4. The instructors are able to help students progress based on the mastery of their content. And so there is a lot of individual personalized checking for understanding, but you're also seeing a lot of small group instruction, because even just writing an essay, students get stuck on the same thing. So teaching similar concepts to students, not necessarily the same assignment even, but they're still struggling with similar concepts. And so there's a lot of different ways that you can implement blended learning in the classrooms to see this, but it truly is a great way for a teacher or a school to really focus on the student and help them progress at their own pace. And it is interesting where in the case of the students I work with, so much of it is just they missed concepts. So they get stuck for a little while. And then once you help them through that difficult, challenging piece, they're able to accelerate and catch up to the class, the majority of the class again, while others, so there's constantly an ebb and flow and who's accelerating and who's taking some time in a unit.
And then when you're having those conversations about the observation, one of the things that you want to start talking about is, how does the teacher divide the kids into groups? And then what's the reasoning behind that decision making? Is there data behind it? Is it something that, hey, is ongoing, that does adapt as the kids have different needs throughout the year? And then also, what are the structures and practices that the teacher have in place to monitor student mastery? Or, is there something, or is it just, hey, this is the day we review and we're going to get back in there and then go from it? Or is it, like I was guilty of this as a teacher. I would do tickets out the door all the time, but then I never read them, right? So yeah, I would get good marks on my evaluation that said, hey, he's checking, but really I may well not have done the activity because it didn't really drive my instruction the next day. I just ran out of time. Had that been something digitally, maybe I would have been able to consume that within 30 seconds and say, oh, you know what, tomorrow I need to rehit this, this, and this. And so those are the kind of things that you can start talking with your teachers that you're evaluating. What are those practices? How are you following through? How are they connected to making sure that you're differentiating, that there's student-centered progression, and that you have personalized pathways? So again, you'll notice these strands are very, very, very closely related in this domain. And so a lot of the questions are going to be related and you're going to drive home to the same kind of principles. Anything to add there, Tammy?
No, I think you covered it great. Thank you.
All right, so this is where we'd open it up for questions. I don't see anything in the chat. And so I think we can just PR our next ones.
Okay, so please join us on January 11th for the third part of the blended learning, and just let me go back and look and see what part 3 is. We didn't put that there. The next grouping, we will be covering classroom culture, student agency, equity, assessment, and data. So that is what we'll be covering in parts 3, 4, and 5 on January 11th, February 8th, and March 8th from 4 to 5:30 each Tuesday. So thank you very much and have a great evening.